Let's get started. We're hoping Ruth will show up.
Yeah.
I just want to mention a couple things. I mean, these books we read, it seems like all of the TV, there's so many TV and movie people out there these days. They're all grabbing for scripts because they have to keep churning things out. So a lot of them are choosing the books that we read and different, books for their source of story. And I noticed that Netflix is going to be doing some Ilana Ferrante books again.
Wow.
They're doing The Lying Life of Adults, which I think we read here, didn't we?
Yes.
Not too long ago.
That's the third one, yeah.
And then The Lost Daughter they're doing, and HBO already did a couple series on My Brilliant Friend, and they're going to be doing a third one coming up.
Ah.
And the reviewers said the third one's the best. So keep an eye on those, and there's others out there. I just didn't keep track of them all. Now, I want to mention that you're probably all aware of our seed library here in Door County. And this year we've expanded to multiple branches. Every branch has a seed library now. And in March, something like the 24th, there's going to be an expert speaking at Crossroads on something called Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden. And that's an actual book that was written long ago based on Native American agricultural practices. So we're going to be doing what's called the Seeds Read Book Club. And if you'd all like to join, that would be just great because it's kind of interesting. The book is called Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden. It's available through Hoopla for those of you out of the area. We have only a few copies of the hardcover book or the actual book in the library system, but it's was written in like 1917 or so. So it is out on the Gutenberg Project in different places like that. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of. And I think the man who's going to be speaking at Crossroads is his name is Frank Kupcha. He's an expert who has studied this and is worked a lot in, I think, North Dakota. He's a professor. And I think that may be online also. So if you want to watch that Crossroads program and then join us for the book discussion, that would be really kind of interesting.
Okay.
So that is, our book discussion will be April 13th at 3:30. It's on the calendar already.
Okay.
So that's my little thing about that upcoming. And John Harris usually has a spring book discussion, as you all know, but he indicated he's not feeling up to it. He has not scheduled anything. So I'm sorry to say at this point, we don't have a history book discussion for the spring. I'm hoping he'll feel more up to it in the fall. So,
Laura, I missed the second word. It was Buffalo something Women's Garden. What was the second word?
Buffalo Bird Woman's Garden. And if you look on our
Buffalo.
calendar
Okay,
page for April 13th, I have more information
Okay.
on the book.
okay,
It's
got it.
Gilbert Wilson.
Okay,
And if you know anyone interested in that sort of thing, let them know.
got it.
Okay, then you know about the voting list. Please send in your votes. I'm allowing
Vote for 6?
6. Yeah, I have the dates at the top. This goes through October. And I tried, a few people recommended books and I tried to include them. In a couple cases, there just weren't copies. 1 or 2 copies, that's just not going to work. So I had to go with what is available and, 2 people through the library catalog or the apps. So, okay, let's get started on this. This was an awfully, to me, a very complex book on so many levels. It's kind of stunning and I have trouble even remembering the names. I'm sure you all encountered some of that. A little background on the author. I think she speaks a lot, but she basically covers the book itself. She was apparently born around 1982 in Nigeria and was raised there, and as a young girl went off to England to get her more higher education. So she did get a law degree in England. She has a master's in international project management from Scotland, and she has a master's in creative writing from a college in London. So she is highly, highly educated. And the other thing that fascinated me is to find out about her mother. And in the book, of course, she writes about a lower rural girl who doesn't have any education to start with. That's not in her case at all. Her mother was highly educated also. In fact, let me read a little bit about this. Her mother was, she's nicknamed Teju Tax. She went to a Methodist girls' school in Lagos, and she then went on to get a degree in from a university in Lagos in English, or art degree in English. She went on to get a tax administration degree from the University of Paris. She worked in the government as, eventually, she went through a whole bunch of different levels, but she eventually became the board secretary of the Federal Board of Inland Revenue. She's very well known as a leader in tax. Whoops, a couple people are joining us. So she's like very high in the government, actually, believe it or not. So that's the background that the Abi is, what is her name? Abi Daré.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Ruth.
Hi, Ruth.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi, Kristen.
You don't
Oh, Kristen, you're showing off your arm.
And for those of us just joining, we have a new member here, Lori, who is here in the library today.
Oh, hi, Lori. Hello.
So anyway, this is pretty amazing that the author herself and her mother are super highly educated. The mother was divorced and put the Abi and her brother through school, and that's where we start. So she doesn't write from experience so much as from observation. So what did you all think about this book? Let's hear a little bit to start with. Or should we jump into Ruth's point about language? Or sorry, Adele's brought up the point about language to me. Did any of you listen to this book? Or did you all read it?
Read.
Read it.
Read.
I read it, and having lived 6 years in West Africa, it was a total treat to hear the Pidgin English or West African English or whatever, it has various terms, just brought back so many memories. And I love the language, although I think some people might have found it hard to, especially at the beginning, to get used to some of the idiomatic terms that West African English contains. But to me, it was a wonderful pleasure just to hear in my head the lilt of the language, and I so look forward to listening to it. I'm on the waiting list. It should come in 5 to 6 weeks, I think, and I will listen to it with great pleasure.
Did anyone have trouble with the language?
No.
No.
I found myself changing it automatically in my head, like the way you would talk. 'Cause
Well,
it
I
didn't-
who is someone who's going to say something? Yeah.
Something about changing.
I just wanted to, I listened to it and mostly, and I wanted to let you hear the narrator of the book, which is pretty interesting because she is speaking, it's not actually full Pidgin English. I had to research this after Adele mentioned it. She's trying to capture the sound of it. Let me see if I can.
Variously called West African English or Pidgin English.
Let me try
or
this
Coast
once
English,
more.
some people call it. West Coast English.
Pidgin English is kind of I think this shares a sound. I'm not always great at technology, but I try. So here's what it sounds like with the reader.
Sun
Does
climbed
anyone hear
down from
that?
the sky and hide herself deep in the crack of the night. I sit up on my raffia mat, kick Keu's leg away from my feet, and rest my back on the wall of our room. My head been stoning my mind with many questions since this morning, questions that are not having answers. What is it meaning to be the wife of a man with 2 wives and 4 children?
So you get a little of the gist of that. Did everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of lilt. It's almost like music when they speak.
And did you? Yeah.
But even reading it, I think it really added to the character, you know, you really felt more of what she was like, and that, I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the way it was done, I did. And it seemed to me as the book went on and she became a little more refined as she met Mrs. Tia and so forth. She, you know, that even, her language even became a little more refined too. But anyway, it was,
She was, Lingo, she was probably hearing more of a more proper English, and so her language adjusted, especially after she met Tia.
Mhm.
Well, what's interesting to me is I started looking up all sorts of video, YouTube videos on Pidgin English. And apparently you can't understand it very well at all. So here's what the author wrote about this. I just wanted to let you know, since it seems to be such an important part of the book. She wrote, Nigerians speak something called Pidgin English, and I knew I didn't want to write in Pidgin English because even the very educated people speak Pidgin English. So I knew it wasn't going to be that. I wanted it to be non-standard English, whatever that meant. I thought by doing that, I would make it Adunise, and I could be her own English, so to speak. So she says she watched a whole lot of movies, and then what she did was sort of adapted a language style that's a little bit between Pidgin English and modern. And then she also studied Alice Walker and The Color of Purple, believe it or not, because she managed to bring in some sort of accent that gave her sort of a guide to how she could do it in the book. So I thought that was really fascinating. How often do you come across that sort of thing in a book?
Agree.
You just go online and start looking up Pidgin English on YouTube. You'll be surprised. So anyone have comments on that?
My husband writes, and in one of his recent works, he had discovered hip hop language, which he has no familiarity with at all. But he looked up a lot of hip hop lyrics, and then he decided to try to incorporate some of that type of language. But what he discovered was you could pretty much do anything you wanted to. It isn't fixed, and I think that's kind of what you're saying about Pidgin English too. It's not quite fixed in style. It doesn't quite have a grammar of its own or a definite way for it to be right Pidgin English, if I may use air quotes. And so he sort of adapted it to his own voice and put the words in that he thought would work. And it pretty much did, at least for me. But what do I know about hip hop language? So, yeah.
Is that a novel that he's written? Fiction?
I think this one is a play. It's a script for a play.
I see. Interesting. Well, it's got to be quite a feat to write like that, though, doesn't it? Don't you think so?
Well, he found it very free. So
He is a wonderful writer.
It helps to identify with the character, that's for sure. You know, when an author writes how they want you to hear the character and they actually put those words on the page, it helps you to identify it, I think.
She really does give it really does give the girl a character.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the language in this book, and I thought to myself in the beginning that I will bet as she becomes more educated, the language of the book is going to change, or her voice in the book will change. And it did by the last few pages, at least.
Yeah, I think it was earlier, I caught on to the kind of usage, the problems with the verbs and so forth. And, verbs are the hardest thing for anybody learning English. But there were some beautiful passages that were sporadically were in there. Even early on, she described—
You're a little broken up, Jean.
Oh, I wonder why. Okay, let me take a look here and see what's going on. It's still broken up? Is it still breaking up?
It's,
Yeah.
Little
It's a
bit.
transmission. pass.
Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, All right, well, I'll go back. I'll leave. I'll come back in. All right, no problem. Let me just see. You guys go on, yeah.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I think I'm the one who forgot to plug this in all properly. I've forgotten my technology in the last month. Is everyone there?
we're here.
Yeah.
Okay,
You are.
I'm sorry. All right, is Jean there now or is she rebooting?
I think she's
No.
rebooting.
Yes.
Okay, you keep talking, I'm gonna try to plug something in.
What did you do? Or not do?
What-
Me?
Okay, just let it go.
I went sledding down Hill 17 in Door County,
Oh,
which is the biggest hill in Peninsula State Park.
With the kids?
did you
Take
hit
the
a
kids?
tree?
How did the grandkids survive?
They were fine.
Shut up.
Who's 8 years old went down 8 times. I got injured on the first time I went down. And I just told them, I think I hurt my wrist and I'll be in the car. So they could keep on swimming because they had never been there before. So they had fun.
Well, if you're
would-
going to be injured, I think that's a wonderful
shut this
place and a
damn thing off.
wonderful way.
It's a good story. It's a good story.
One time I made it down. It was fun.
Story person.
Well, back to Jean. Is Jean there again? Not, she's not speaking. She's trying to come back in. Well, we can move on, I guess, and hear her comment when she gets back in.
Here.
Yeah,
Does
I
it-
was gonna say for the in contrast to the people who were so, I'll say mean to our main character, her brother, her mother's friend who helped her out, who got, yeah, of course, Mrs. Tia, who helped that, you know, you had such a contrast in the other people in the book, the characters that either helped her or else made her life
And
miserable.
Kofi, the cook, really helped her a lot. Kofi, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it.
Yes, Kofi was another one. Yes, definitely.
She had really good people in her life and some wretched people in her life. And amongst the wretched, of course, were her father and Big Daddy and the fellow who was supposed to marry Katya.
Mhm.
Get his-
Yes.
Oh, that's better.
A list here, but it's so many characters, it's hard to keep
It was
track of
hard.
them.
It was. I do like the character of Big Madam, even though she was kind of
Mhm.
a character. But you can see how she brought herself up from, nothing and all that. You can see that, so.
And support her husband. And
Interesting
I think
character.
she even was a major support for her sister. It was sort of implied.
Yes.
It was just a loop of abuse that they were all caught in, it seems like. Because of the cultural norms of the country.
Mhm.
Did anybody find it surprising that the story was written or took place, in the last decade? Because, I think a lot of people think, well, oh, this happened, that happened a long time ago, but it's such an important story to realize that, human trafficking exists everywhere and prominently in places like that.
Yes. In fact, this book was hard for me because I just don't know that much about the culture. Did other people find that? And you hear this little bits about, what is it, Boko Haram? Taking these girls, and I don't
Yeah.
even understand what that's all about. Does anyone know that situation? Isn't that in Nigeria
I think
also?
that's Muslim, in the Muslim culture, taking the girls out of education.
Educate, yeah.
Muslim men, I suspect, taking Muslim girls away from school opportunities.
Hmm.
The only part of the book that didn't make sense to me, from what I'm remembering, was where Tia goes to this bath ceremony, which is supposed to help her become pregnant. I never heard or saw anything of that caliber. That does not mean it doesn't exist, and it must, or she wouldn't have written it.
I did research
Oh,
on
good.
it.
That didn't ring a bell with me at all.
You didn't experience anything
I
like
did
that?
not.
Well, I looked it up a little, and this is not from the exact same part of Nigeria, but there's an abstract article here on the medical side of it, and apparently women are, especially new mothers or mothers to be, are treated, it's considered, if you're cold, that's a very dangerous thing. So they overheat them, and then they give them these hot baths. They use scalding water, and they spray it on them. And apparently a lot of women come into the hospital, which is the last resort for the people of these cultures, scalded and burned badly. In some cases, their breasts are just ruined, so they can't nurse. So apparently this is, at least in, some of this bath business is part of the tradition or the superstition there. So I think she was trying to give us a little glimpse of that, but I'll bet there's a lot more going on than just the hot bath.
There is, and I can give you a personal story. When we got first to West Africa, we had only been married half a year. And so of course we had no children, nor did we plan any during the time we were going to be living in that village. And all the ladies kept coming to commiserate with me with suggested foods that I should eat or things that I should feed my husband to encourage pregnancy. And of course, it didn't happen, and they were increasingly disappointed the entire 3 years we lived there. But later, I had 2 sons, and they learned about it, and then I was a queen, because sons are so desirable, and I produced, first 2 popped out were sons, and they thought, oh, you are so good.
Yeah, that was very obvious that was important in the book, that you were not a woman who had children or chose not to have children, that you were nothing. And
You were. They
sons,
could not conceive of somebody making a choice not to.
right,
And I had a hard time explaining that.
yes.
I was unsuccessful in defining the reasons we didn't.
Well, even Tia in the last decade, 2014 was having a hard time, explaining her wishes.
And the whole structure of the society where the men are so important. I mean, that's almost, many cultures have experienced that, but it seems so severe there, where you have this lump of the big daddy who's getting all the advantages and acts like a total jerk and being supported by his wife. Now, some African cultures and other cultures of the world are matriarchal. But which ones, I don't know. Does that make a difference in the way the women are treated?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it does.
I think that's in South America. I don't think there's any African cultures that are matriarchal, but maybe there
There's
are.
one,
Okay,
because when I started trying to read, I didn't get very far with it, but they did list one
okay.
that was, but this is surely not.
But motherhood is very valued. A lot of their statutes show women with enormous breasts, enormous thighs, so they're very capable of bearing many, many children. And many women do bear many children.
And I'm sorry to say it looks like we've lost Jean, who hasn't been able to log back in, but is it just the giving childbirth, or is it the son thing? Now look at China today. Do they still have that policy of only having one child and
I think, yeah, they can have 2.
Mm.
I don't know.
and they value boys over girls, right? And
In the area we lived in, it was tradition that the first son's wife would care for the couple in their old age. So it's important to have a son and to supervise the selection of a very appropriate wife, because that was going to be their caregiver as they age. And to make sure things work, they usually tried for a second son, and again, they supervised the wife selection just to assure themselves good care. But I think that was probably unique to that area. That was in Cameroon.
And does anyone understand the marriage structure here? Now, as I understand it, these are Christian, this is a Christian community, right? But how is the husband having so many wives?
I think it's biblically based because of the Old Testament.
So
I think it's the tribal structure, a holdover from the tribal structures before Christianity, really.
okay. Because that's kind of interesting. You think in the Muslim tradition, they're allowed 4 in certain, the Mormons traditionally, but here we have it again. And what did you think about the contrast between the small village life and the big city? Which would be more pleasing, do you think?
Boy, that's a tough selection.
Well, the small village life was still pretty modern because they had electricity. And she had a TV, non-functioning, but she had a TV in the house and a radio. But it was not totally rural. There are probably still many more areas without power coming to them. And it did not have running water because she talked about carrying buckets of water for washing and whatnot. So it was probably a village that was in the process of becoming more modern and developed.
But they're backward ways of thinking, because just think, you know how they say, when you're in a small town and you live in a small town, if you don't know what you're doing, somebody else does, right? Well, just think way back, you know, in her old village, even her best friends couldn't see why she didn't want to marry somebody at that young age that already had 2 other wives. They were encouraging that. So the thing is you don't know what you don't know. And so that small village probably hampered her from getting the help she needed. You know, it was only when she got out of that into the bigger city that there were, you know, different ways of viewing things, you know. If she would have stayed where she was at, she probably never would have gotten the help that she got in the end. Maybe.
Yeah, and what do you think about that relationship with, what's her name, Miss Tia? Tia? You know, how does that come about? I mean, how do you take a wealthier old woman and she becomes friends with a young girl like that?
I don't think she was old. I think she
I
was
don't think she was that old either.
30s,
She
maybe?
was pretty progressive because wasn't she from London though? I mean,
and she was an environmentalist and was an engineer of some sort, looking at alternate energy sources. She was probably extremely well educated.
she wore jeans and t-shirts and tennies, so she was very progressive and didn't believe in the cultural mores that were acceptable.
It took
How do
me,
you think? Yeah,
took me a
go
while
on.
to realize that Miss Tia was also Black, as her world was so different, her education, her travel, her time abroad, and the way she looked at the world. And then it suddenly hit me. Yes, she of course she was Black, but she was one of the educated and you know, the elites of the country.
And the contrast between Miss Tia and her mother was quite dramatic. It's only one generation, and her mother was hauling her up to this bath thing.
Her mother-in-law.
Yeah, that was,
Mother-in-law.
So she was really only one generation away from some very
Right.
tribal
But-
thinking.
But she was young enough that she had grown up with these expectations. That was the
Yes.
way she was raised, and that was the way she saw the world. I saw a very, very moving quote from somebody from the situation in the Ukraine right now, where he was 16 or something, and he said he had just, oh no, I'm sorry, it was Afghanistan. And he said he'd grown up after the Taliban had been displaced and run out by the Western world. And by the time he was 16, he didn't know anything else. And he just thought it was normal to be hanging out with your friends and watching television and listening to Western music and getting a tattoo if you wanted to. And then all of a sudden, the Taliban, with whom he had no experience, were back in power. And he had to leave because his brother had been an interpreter for the US Army. And when he had to leave, he suddenly realized, how was he going to get out? He had a tattoo on his skin, and the Taliban were known for cutting those off with their handy knife if they caught somebody with a tattoo.
Wow.
And he wrapped it up in a bandage. Fortunately, it was on his lower arm. And he wrapped it as though he was wounded, and he managed to get out without them seeing his tattoo. But he didn't know anything else. And I would think that Miss Tia was certainly cognizant of the other parts of her country, but she herself had never really realized or clearly visualized that slavery was still going on. They just didn't call it that anymore.
Mhm.
She hadn't really run into that until she began to talk with Aduni.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Was someone going to say something? Did I hear?
I was just going to say that that women's group was a little bit unusual, the character of it and the makeup of it, and she didn't really fit. And that was one of the reasons why. She was
Yeah.
a younger generation and she saw the world a lot differently than they did. So, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, one thing, I watched a little bit of the author speaking on a few videos, and she said the reason she started writing this book partly was her daughter. She lives in England, and her daughter was, a little lazy about doing emptying the dishwasher or something like that. And so then she tried to tell her, you're so lucky to have this kind of life that so many girls in, say, Nigeria don't have that sort of advantage. And to me, looking at the author herself, she's so highly educated, and her mother was highly educated, and she is a lawyer and she's got all these degrees. So she said the way she started writing this was to talk to people, to hear the stories. So she's not writing firsthand. She's writing what she's heard from other people. And that's kind of like Tia, isn't it? Learning from Aduni, yeah. It does not roll off my tongue.
No.
And what about all those names? I was looking at those names on the list. A lot of them are African names, but you have Rebecca. Where does that come from? What is the symbolism of that one? Anyone have a comment there? We have a couple Western names.
I could say a little bit something about that. I taught at a missionary school for the first year we were in the Peace Corps. And when the girls came to the school, they all had proper West African names, tribal names. The missionaries required them to adopt a Western name, and it had to be biblical.
Oh.
So Rebecca was very common, as was Maria and
Caroline.
Esther.
Carolyn.
It had to be a biblical female, and there aren't that many of them. So the class of 36 kids or so, I had 2 Esthers and 3 Marys. So
Wow.
Joanna was a common one too. So that may have been how Rebecca obtained a Christian Western name. I think there's a Rebecca in the Bible.
Yes.
Oh, yes, she's a matriarch.
Yeah.
So what's the symbolism, do you think, in this Rebecca having that
She may
name?
have gone to a Christian primary school, or her mother had, and baptized, or she may have been baptized, and then they usually were required to take a Christian name. In the area we lived in, it's not the same as this. That may have been a uniform missionary policy.
Well, Rebecca kind of set the course for what Aduni's life would be like if there was no intervention.
Mhm.
And I think that's why Aduni was, so
Curious.
trying to figure out like what happened to her and is this going to happen to me, and just trying to kind of lead her own path.
And I was wondering why Kofi didn't tell her what happened to Rebecca. Kofi surely knew.
We never find out, right? Does anyone do,
We do find out at the end what happened to Rebecca.
what exactly though? Well, supposedly she went off.
Ew.
She goes off and she's bleeding in the car. You assume
Yeah.
that there's a pregnancy going fast.
Yeah,
But Kofi surely knew what was going on, and he just warned her about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Big Daddy, but didn't say, look what he did.
Yeah. Maybe because she was such a young girl, didn't want to scare her, but at the same time was giving her tips to help herself or to just be cautious.
And the chauffeur also could have knew exactly what happened, because he had driven the car when Rebecca went away. And he never told her.
Maybe they would have been implicated.
They were all afraid of Big Daddy and Big Mama, that's for sure, Big Madam, I guess.
I kept wondering about the legal side of it too, because in some ways they ignored, the value of people's lives, and they would treat them so abusively. And yet other times you had the idea if someone was caught killing someone that they were in trouble. So it sounded like almost like Aduni couldn't leave the house if she wanted. Like she wasn't just free to leave, right?
Yeah.
Was she like bonded to them?
Well,
in
Big
some
Madam
way?
had bought her.
Paid for her?
Why don't she pay
Like
for
an
her?
indentured servant or?
Acquired her from, who's the delivery man, Kiki? No,
No, I don't have his name. No.
Well, she was told she would get a salary and she never did.
Right.
And I think that was part that they had sold her, but they didn't tell her her situation.
Yeah.
So it just seems like a mixture of law and morality is all mixed up to me. I just, like they're worrying about Rebecca and what happened to her, but at the same time they can beat people up and do all sorts of horrible things. So that's kind of confusing.
Well, you can do whatever you want to your property unless you kill them, probably, just as a slave was the property, so she had no rights, and she couldn't, even she was a very outspoken young girl, and that got her into trouble a lot. And that was seen as, what's that word? When you don't talk back to your boss,
subservient.
Yeah.
And what do you think about the way, how did that, what's her name, Big Mama?
Big Mama, yeah.
Yeah. How did she manage to make a business and get lucky? She apparently came from a poor background also. You wonder how she managed to do it.
Sounds like she was a hard worker.
Was
Had
she,
this cloth business.
yeah,
Um,
fabric, and she was selling it to the rich people. So they didn't seem to have a social structure similar to the British where you had to be born to the role, or you never could achieve it, right? She was a self-made person.
Yes.
So it's hard for me to understand this culture, to be honest.
Maybe that's why she didn't divorce Big Daddy a while ago, because it would have seemed like, she was, more in control than what she should have been. Maybe, in the end, she finally did, but maybe she didn't want to be seen as somebody who was more powerful than her husband, because that would not be good. I don't know.
So she was trying to play the role of the wife and fit in. That's probably,
Despite all the bad things he did.
Yeah, and there probably were some issues with his family that predated all of this that wasn't written about, that might have prevented her from. She also probably liked having the idea of a husband around, despite all of his behavioral issues.
And it sounded like she kind of was hoping he would change, like, why don't you love me? Why don't you love me? I do all of this for you and you never lay with me, type of thing,
Which I never got a real picture of what, do you think she was a big, heavy woman or pretty
Oh, yeah.
looking or?
I pictured her as being a big woman, yes.
Yeah, I did too.
The awful skin, remember she was,
Yeah.
it was homely, she had.
And her hair,
was
her hair had some problems. It got scratchy hair.
So she wasn't a beautiful woman when she wasn't all made up, but then she had all that makeup on, different
Yeah.
bright colors, and then she was beautiful.
Big Madam, that was what they called her. Big
Yeah.
Madam.
Yes.
Yeah. And I kept thinking of this, the author's mother. She got divorced fairly early on, and I think the mother, as I say, she went to the top of the tax department in the government, which is pretty amazing.
Yes.
And she said at one point she told her daughter, the girl, Abi writes a pretty interesting little story about it. She was trying to sneak out to see a boy when she was a teenager, and the mother stopped her and said she knew that she was going to meet a boy not to do her chores, and she said, beauty will fade, everything will fade, but the only thing that will not fade is your intelligence and what is in your head, your education. She also said to me as I got older, the only reason why I've been able to educate you and your brother is because I invested in my own education and made something of my life. If I hadn't, both you would not be where you are today. But it doesn't seem like this big madam had much education, did she? Do you remember hearing anything about that? So she just made her way by selling
She did
fabrics?
well, and she had a product that people liked, and there probably was some bribes to get the business going.
It says she has her thing was that she had an important job and she wanted everyone to look important, and that's why she had so many looking glasses in the house too, or mirrors, because she wanted everyone around her to play that part. But it was her job wasn't seen as important.
And she had all these shop girls working for her, and she had a driver and Kofi, the cook that she came all the way from Ghana. That was pretty amazing, that idea.
Right,
Yeah, she was quite a manager,
right. Yes.
but through authoritarian behavior.
Totally.
Mhm.
Well,
she
you
was-
know,
Yeah,
one thing that I thought was interesting is that Big Madam maybe was educated because there were a lot of books in her house. And that's what, Dooney read a lot of these books. And so there was a library there that she had in her home. So there must have been some education.
yeah, that's pretty interesting to
I'd
think
forgotten
about.
about that, yes.
How do you think that Aduni manages to be so positive and kind to people after all of the hardship she went through?
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Tough life, boy, oh boy.
Her mother was just was on her. It had to come from her mother. And when she's falling asleep at night, she's still talking to her mother and hearing her mother's voice in her head. So although her mother was dead, I think the mother was still a really dramatic force in her life.
From a very young child, she wanted to have this big loud voice, the title of the book. She wanted to use her voice. And you know how some kids, I used to be a teacher, so there are some kids who have this awful home life who are just very resilient, and she was very resilient to all that went on, and just really thought that she had the will to go the distance and wanted to use her voice to make her life and other lives better is really something. But right, yeah, where does it come from? Where does resilience come from? I don't know.
Yeah.
She was resilient and persevered, but always with such a happy heart. That's what amazed me. She never lost faith. She never became embittered. She always had a feeling that one, she would succeed, and her perseverance seemed to be generated by that happy heart, which is remarkable considering the adversity she overcame and the cruelty of the madam. I mean, it's inexplicable.
It's hard to even imagine being married at 14, right?
Yeah.
To some creepy old man. who's
Yes.
a tax
Right. Yes.
And apparently there's another book out there by a 10-year-old who managed to get divorced from her husband.
10.
10. It's more that they're sold as property though, right?
Yeah.
I was interested in when she was
Thanks for
married.
joining us. See you next time.
But I have it in 5 minutes.
And I have your email somewhere here, but,
I'll email you my book choices, Laura.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When she was married, she took that trip with the other wife who was pregnant. And that to me was real unusual that they went, the other wife had a boyfriend apparently. And
The one that she had wanted to marry.
and then she got there and he apparently already had a wife.
Yeah.
Or one or more.
But that was the idea that it would be a son, because the original husband couldn't,
Marufu,
yes,
Right.
Marufu could
You
not
lost
have,
your sound.
it's,
could not have a
It's good, I
son, and
think.
so she was hoping to
Something
get
happened
the
here.
son with the other guy, yeah.
oh,
Well, anyway,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. I've messed up this technology today, but good. I don't know.
We
Why
can
does it
hear
do
you.
Please stop.
Yeah.
We just can't see you.
She's hiding under the table, I think.
Come on.
I just thought the story was very engaging. I kept
Yes.
wanting to read it. I liked her as a character.
Oh
Like
no,
you
why
say,
is it doing this?
She was persevering and she was uplifting. I
It's
enjoyed the
just
story.
spinning.
I was just glad I wasn't in that country having that kind of
Yeah, I
life.
I can't do
you know?
anything.
Everybody's trying to
Yeah.
adjust their
Like
steps.
that.
You think they're in
Makes you-
trouble.
Well, we
It
can hear
seemed
each
like it was
other.
very
I
realistic.
can't really even stop it.
We're carrying on without you. Don't worry.
It's like,
We don't have any trouble talking, do
No
we?
problem.
Close this program.
Not a problem. Talk we can.
It was interesting, but like you say, if you don't think, Lori, the one who left, said, you don't think of that still happening in today's world, but it sure does.
It is, yeah.
Scary to think of that.
Well, we know there's human trafficking even in this country, you know, and
Yes. Scary.
and
Anyway.
being married, you know, just the whole thing of her father selling her for what? He couldn't afford his land rent or something like that.
Yes, yes.
Mm.
Like, yeah, it is scary. There we are. Oh, we lost them all together now.
Oh,
dear.
Jane's back.
Yeah,
Get shifted
I'm
around.
having internet issues, so it's my issue right here.
Anyway.
No.
I forgot what the next book is. I remember reading it and liking
The
it.
Pull
Now-
of the Stars.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's right. Yes, that was different, very different. I've never been a nurse and I don't want to be a nurse after reading that book. I don't want to be a nurse. So.
Oh, was that the one with the pandemic?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
And
okay.
she's a young woman in the maternity ward and these young,
Yeah,
the people who had the fever.
1918, yeah.
There's a lot of detail, medical detail that I was like, okay, I don't want to know.
And,
But
and another woman
I'll
who has,
probably enjoy it. Sorry,
another
Ruth.
woman who has educated herself to be able to raise her status in the world.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that's a message that I guess we can't say enough, can we?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's the way to get there. You have to have that education. Yeah. I didn't look at any of the books that are on the list, Laura's list. Has anybody seen her list and have recommendations? I have
No, I
not.
didn't.
I just realized it was there. I didn't even know it was there, so I have to look at that.
Yeah, there were several, there's some good books on that list. Yeah, I've read some of them.
Anything in particular you're fond of?
Well, now I don't have the list in
You
front
don't
of
have
me,
to
so
look
I
at it.
don't
I'm
know.
looking to see. I see nothing. I haven't read any of these. No. I'll tell you what I did read recently that I did enjoy was, you know, the gentleman who wrote Gentleman in Moscow.
Oh,
How do you say
yes.
that?
Lincoln
So I read
Highway.
Lincoln, oh, didn't I love that, the Lincoln?
I
did
did too.
I
And
thought,
I was the only person in the world that didn't like A Gentleman in Moscow, but I, but I really liked the Lincoln Highway. But anyway, yeah, I thought that was a really good book.
yes, I did too. And I really enjoyed that one.
What is the title of the new one?
The Lincoln Highway.
Oh,
You
the
know,
Lincoln.
the middle, the middle of this country, in Illinois, it's called US 30. I don't know if it's called
Yeah.
US 30 everywhere, but it's the highway that runs east and west. It used to be one of the main ones till they built the interstate, but yeah, the Lincoln Highway. It's, you know, I don't know if you've read Kruger's The Tender Land. It kind of reminded me a lot of
Yeah.
that because you got
Yes.
Yeah.
the young
Yeah.
I
kid
agree.
making
Yeah.
this journey, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. That was a good
It's
one.
interesting in that takes place in real time over only 8 days.
Yes.
And yet it's this huge tome. It's like nearly 600
500
pages.
something pages, but it went quick, yeah.
Yeah.
And he labeled the chapters exactly what you said. He went 9, 8, he went backwards in numbering his
Yeah.
chapters. So anyway,
Chronologically.
if you can get it,
Yeah.
it's a good read. It's a good one.
Well,
I have
you know,
one-
I think one of the books on the list was Clara and the Sun.
Uh-huh.
Did anybody read that?
Yes.
I thought it was the worst book I ever read, but
And I loved it, Jane.
I mean,
Oh, there it is.
the fellas won, you know, Pulitzer prizes, and I hate to quibble with the Pulitzer Prize winner, but
Yes.
oh my goodness, I didn't get that book at all.
Oh. Well, that's one of the ones where they don't tell you very much in the beginning. They just
Okay.
jump into present time and you have to slowly figure out what the past was.
Oh.
Well, and science fiction is not my genre. That I have
Yeah.
certainly figured out.
Yes, I agree with you on that.
I have a
one.
suggestion. Circe,
Yeah,
Madeline Miller, wonderful book.
Oh,
is that right?
yeah.
I haven't
It's
I
read
not
read
the
that one.
kind of thing that everyone would like. It's Greek mythology, only it's even more fictionalized than conventional Greek mythology, which we had to learn in high school. But it's a good read. It goes really fast, and it's told from the point of view of Circe. First person, she narrates it and tells her story. Really
Wow.
good book.
Yeah.
I didn't read her first one, which was
Madeline Miller.
about Achilles.
Yeah,
But
I think it's just
she's
titled.
widely recognized, and I'm going to attending a Zoom this week with the author, so that should be interesting.
Oh, it is interesting.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Circe, Madeline Miller.
Madeline Miller. My grandson, okay, I did not know that much about Greek mythology, but the hot author in the middle school or less, he's my grandson's 4th grade, is the Percy Jackson series, and it's all about, you know, all of the mythology. So I'm reading it so I can talk to him about it so that I understand it too. And I like doing that. I have fun doing that with my grandson. We get a kick out of that.
Well, the Percy Jackson thing is interesting that you mentioned that, Janine. The Madison Opera in May is doing a production of Offenbach's Orpheus in the Underworld. And
Oh,
they are advertising it as this party of the gods and everybody wants to come because it's the party of the season. And we're taking our grandsons who know all of the major characters
they
because
do.
of Percy Jackson.
Percy Jackson, yeah. That was a very smart author, that guy. He really has it in
Yeah.
there. Yes.
Well, I'm astonished because they know more about the story of
Yes.
Orpheus's opera than I do.
That's what I said. I have to
Oh,
read.
interesting. Yeah.
That's what they're
Hmm.
into. I think I'm gonna take off and go. It's a beautiful day. I've got to get outside and get some work done. April, right?
April, right?
April.
Getting there. Days are getting.
What about
weeks to
March?
Daylight savings time.
Okay,
This
goodbye.
March.
So long, Jeannie.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.